Hi, I'm Brittany Pacheco.
Man, I'm fucked up from this episode, bruh.
And we are the Watchers in the Basement. Welcome back to our channel. Consider subscribing if you are new, and we want to give a big thank you to those who have already subscribed and are following our recaps of Interview with the Vampire. Frank, this episode was wild, and I think this episode was the one that we've really been waiting on the most because there were so many questions about the original interview between Daniel Molloy and Louis Dupont Dulac. Frank, overall reactions on this episode. Go.
Best episode of the series. Of the series, like up top. Like for me, it felt so it filled in so many gaps. Because even season one, like you saw the flashback of like the bar scene, but again, they just kept spoon feeding you of like, nah, motherfucker, we ain't gonna show you just yet what went down. We're gonna get some more of the 1940s jazz and this 1920s jazz and like Paris and all that. Like, nah, I need to know the source. I need to know how this came about and how they met. And like this answers everything. Like even moving forward, I have a better understanding of like the foundation of Molloy and Louis and Armand's relationship. So A1, 10 out of 10.
Such a great episode. I was absolutely blown away. And first off, I just want to let everyone know who may be new or may not be familiar with Frank and myself. We are huge fans of this series, of course. It's been about 15 plus years since we've read Interview with a Vampire. Of course, there's a lot of other books in the Chronicles, the Vampire Chronicles, written by the wonderful Anne Rice. So we don't claim to be experts. We are just enjoying this show and have absolutely just absorbed every ounce of content that we've received, and really just enjoy talking about this show with a lot of you out there. Thank you for your comments. Like, thank y'all so much for correcting us. Thank you so much for just giving us insight. That's been great, right, Frank?
It's been great, man. It's like a compass. Like the fan base and the people commenting on the show have been like that map, that compass that we need to kind of navigate between the book variants and the show canon. So yeah, thank you for all who's been watching. Even if you're not commenting, just giving us that click and that like, man, means a lot. So keep on doing it.
For sure. So, Frank, let's dive into this episode because for once, we are actually not going back to Paris. We're not even talking about Claudia much. There is some mention. We are going back to 1973. We're going back to San Francisco, California, where the very first interview between Louis and Daniel is conducted. Shout out to my God, I just like spaced out on his name, Luke Brandon Field, who reprises his role as the young Daniel Molloy. My God, his performance, like the look, the cadence, the mannerism that is that of Eric Bogosian as the older Daniel Molloy. Like what are your overall thoughts on his performance as the young Daniel?
That the 70s were fucking weird. Like that's that like the ambiance of the 70s from what you read about from like the TV shows, Studio 54, just everything about California at that time. It was just like at freebase and sex, ambiguity of sex, like people were just enjoying themselves. It was like an extension of Woodstock, the nose candy, the Britney Spears, the Dakota
Not
Fannings of
the
it all,
Britney Spears.
the man, like just everything. Like it was just like whatever's going on, we gotta be about this, and if you either be down with it or not. But on a more serious note, like I love the detail of like the scene of the room, the scene of the bar, the cassette player, the microwave, like everything was just canon from the 70s. It felt like I was in a time capsule, and I was waiting for the BGs to come out and just start performing on like right on that wood floor. Like it was so like the floor director, the staging director, people who put that together, they didn't spare any expense. They did a really really great job of really like through a a bird's view window, give you what 1973 looked like.
And talking about staying alive, I mean, Daniel was kind of toying with that whole line in and of itself, because Louis apparently, this isn't the first time that he's brung. Oh my God, listen to me. This is not the first time he's brought home a young man, to one of his many establishments, right? He's
only 5 times, right? According to Louis.
According to Louis, it's 5 times, but according to Armand, it was like 128. But
Yeah.
when you a hoe, you a hoe. So, with Louis, Louis found some sort of fascinating trait within Daniel and wants to have like this interview with him and just kind of just tell him everything. Tell him that he's a vampire, which is, by the way, breaking, one of the great laws, right? We've heard so much about these great laws. But Louis is just like, he's just looking for a good time, and they seem to be vibing with one another, the young Daniel and Louis. And it kind of seemed like maybe they're gonna like get into it and like do it or whatever. I mean, the vibe was there, right, Frank?
I thought they did. Like I was like, because like even like the connection they have on screen, like I mean, I know they're actors, but like the characters in between the two, I thought they fucked. Like I thought it's the 70s. They probably had a weird night. Got some Britney Spears, got some nose candy in there. Before you know it, they became one that night. They became one that night, but it was not the way that we thought it was. So
it wasn't. I mean, according to Daniel and modern time, there's a lot of back and forth. People we'll try to keep up with it. But according to the modern time, Louis, he's like, no, we didn't. But it seemed like Daniel was like kind of into it back in the 70s. He, probably just wanted to, give it a shot. Hey, 70s, different time, people. But what was interesting was the young Daniel Molloy. Of course, he's being fed. I say fed loosely, but he was getting pumped with drugs, right? He's taking, the cocaine and what have you, and he's interviewing Louis all at the same time. And he's kind of like saying, hey, you're bored. Like you're bored with the life that you've been living. You're bored with this Armand. He actually doesn't really even talk about Armand. Louis is talking only about Lestat. Like Lestat, who has been out of his life for how many years at that point? It's been
at least 40.
At least 40.
Yeah, that
right.
point, yeah.
Yeah. So Lestat has been out of Louis' life for 40 years. Louis has been with Armand for the last 30 or so. But why the fact that Armand's relationship with Louis is not being discussed during this interview it's kind of baffling, right? It's only about Lestat. And the question at that moment for me was kind of like, well, why does Louis want to have this interview? Is it because he's hoping that Daniel is going to publish this interview so that the book is out there or whatever sort of a medium is out there, so that maybe perhaps Lestat would find it and come back to find him? Like, I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
I think it's a little bit of everything. I think because at this point he still doesn't know how, if Lestat's even alive, right? I mean, from the flashbacks that we saw in Paris and in Eastern Europe, he's fearful that Lestat's chasing after him and that they're gonna kill him and Claudia. But then, like, you see more so like of how the interview is going. It's like a therapeutic session. Like, I don't know, over the time leaving Paris, whatever happened in Paris to now, that if Armand just kind of like forbade him to talk about Lestat, but there's like unfinished business. There's like no closure. Even like the years leaving Paris, and then also too, like, I think about this because we don't know what happened in Paris just yet. We know a fire happened. We know the vampire theater is gone, but we don't know what took place, how that went down. Maybe the PTSD from that kind of like just conjured everything up again, from like the loss of Claudia to the loss of Lestat, and he's just like not having anywhere to like run to, and Armand's the one person he could rely on, but not like truly be himself and vulnerable with, because the man that his first love was somebody that Armand's a trigger for too. So I'm thinking that this interview was more like an outlet, an act of desperation to like get whatever he needed to get out. And if Lestat came and found him, or if Lestat came and killed him, I think he wants that closure. I believe just to like put that book to that chapter to bed, whether or not it's for love or for to meet his maker per se.
Meet his maker. Ha! That's too funny. Those are great points, truly. And I'm trying to think of how I want to like ease into this next topic of I guess Lestat truly is that trigger for Louis. Like it's kind of what Claudia had mentioned in the previous episode about how she herself kind of chases the bad things that have gone on in her life, right? And that's pretty common for people who have had really tough experiences and they seem to have a difficult time getting away from, for lack of a better word, toxicity. And it seems that Louis is also subject to that, right? He kind of thrives on the toxic, and maybe that's why he's had so many encounters with other humans or whatever the case may be, because he eventually has it out with Armand and says some really hurtful things. But I'm jumping ahead. So going back to the interview between Daniel and Louis, of course, Daniel is really, doped up on cocaine, and he starts saying things that are starting to trigger Louis and getting a reaction from Louis that I don't think was anticipated by saying things such as, I could be your Claudia, your Lestat. And that I think pretty much sets Louis over the edge, because then Louis will actually violently attack Daniel. Talk on that, Frank.
Yeah, so kind of to go back what I was saying, like Louis just wanting to get something off his chest. It seemed like there was this decades of just suppressing memories of like the people that he was around, Claudia and Lestat, and he finds his young Molloy, and like he sees something in him. You hear the word fascinating, fascinating, fascinating through this episode. And out of the 128 victims that came there and didn't make it out that night or the next day, he sees something in Molloy. And I think Molloy being a journalist, and I think Louis seeing a lot of himself in Molloy, a broken individual, not having direction, not having purpose of like what to do in his life. I think he saw a lot of himself in him. It's kind of like the to go back on Game of Thrones, the Tywin Tyrion thing, like how Tywin despises Tyrion so much, but it's to the point where like I think a big part why he despises him so much is because he sees a lot of himself in him. So it turns to self hatred, and I think there's a lot of self hatred that Louis has, whether it's from guilt, whether it's for what happened to Claudia, whether it's just from guilt from his brother, his family, his human family. But back in the day, he's never really dealt with any of these losses, right? Like he's always just plowed forward. Season one to me is so sad because he didn't have a chance to mourn for his brother. He didn't have a chance to mourn for his mother. His mother passed away. He was not around. The birth of his twin nieces. There are a lot of things regarding family that just came about and passing by that he never had a chance to come to grips with or come chance to come to terms with. And I think Molloy was the first, not just first human, but first person that he sees. Damn, he's broken like me. He's broken like me too. Oh shit! And you're a journalist? Well, shit. Let me get this story out now of how I feel, and let me use this medium as a diary of my life and see if I could strike a chord somewhere with this, because I think destruction, whether subconsciously, is in Louis is that Louis Verizon, and I think Molloy is that one person that he can go to let out what he's feeling before that end happens.
So let me also kind of backtrack a little bit. With the beginning of this episode, it of course takes place during the modern Dubai interview that's being conducted, and Armand is actually on a hunt, if you will, for lack of better terms, right? There's this fuckboy Bitcoin guy who agrees basically to be hunted down by Armand, and if he survives, he ends up getting a crap ton of money. But Armand's a very old
Crypto,
vampire.
right?
What's that?
No, it's crypto, right? Like a
Yeah, it was crypto. Yeah.
yeah.
So whatever the agreement was, Armand has left the original interviewee to their own devices, and on the idea that, okay, we're going to continue about talking about Paris and how wonderful our lives were in Paris, and we would break into a library and look up at the stars, and blah blah blah, giving this facade of like, oh, everything was just wonderful in our relationship, right? But by taking it back to 1973, because Daniel has questions of his own, he's got images on his computer I can't remember if they're his own or that organization that we've talked about before has placed. Thank you. If they've placed those images onto his computer, and then the audio files that he has of that original interview, the actual cassette tape, and then another piece of audio that's been altered that he plays for Louis. So this is why they're able to speak so freely, because Armand stepped away, because he obviously controls the atmosphere of the interview that they're in Dubai. So not having his influence there, because we have seen Armand enter into Daniel's mind anytime Daniel seems to get too close to a subject matter, or he's really just pushing for more information, right? We see that kind of manipulation to scare him away from getting too close to that topic, right? So we've seen that kind of played out throughout this season thus far, but now we're getting into the nitty-gritty of it. So Daniel wants his questions answered. He's like, give me time, like answer my questions, because they both are having a very difficult time recalling the events of 1973. He remembers he, of course, was doing drugs. He remembers Louis attacking him. Louis very much bit him on the neck and seemed to be sucking the life out of him. And that's all that Daniel remembers. But then you go back in time, you see the events unfolding, and Armand bursts into the room to pull Louis off Daniel, and then they start hashing it out. The fact, oh my God, I'm still always blown away by Jacob Anderson's performance as Louis, because he has bitten Daniel, who was so much drugs were in his system, right? It's now transferred to Louis, and he's unleashing every thought, every word that he's kept bottled up inside of him, and he's unleashing it into Armand, which this kind of seems like it's not the first time that this happened. So maybe their love story really isn't as wonderful as Armand has made it seem to be. Wouldn't you agree, Frank?
I'm not too sure about that. I think this is the most vile argument they had, because there was a lot of truth, and there was a lot of truth. What Louis' truth? Basically, just call him a bore. Like, you're just powerful entity that you can do anything that you want. You have people on your whim, vampires, humans, whatever, and you've been nothing but a bore to me for decades. And the thrill seeker that I'm looking for, you're just not it. I mean, I voiced my frustrations about Claudia so much throughout the series, but one thing Claudia gave Louis was purpose, excitement, and adventure. One thing the things that Lestat gave Louis was purpose, toxicity, life, and adventure. Like, these were just high octane moments in life that was bookend by moments of toxicity, grief, and frustration, but it was still highly entertaining. And Armand is he's not that. And I think what kind of gave Armand a leg to stand on was the theater, was Paris, because his covenant was crazy and wild and unpredictable and violent and entertaining. And I think by proxy, it gave Armand more of a reputation because of what his covenant was. And I don't think Louis has ever talked that plainly and that vile to Armand before. I think that was the first time. Um, and I think if it wasn't for that, um, I think Molloy is dead. I think because Louis was set off by Molloy, and Molloy through I mean Molloy didn't know Molloy's high. He's talking about how he can replace Claudia and how he can replace Lestat. But I think him doing that saved his life and turned. I mean, Louis was going to kill him, but like Armand saved him, and then Louis saved him through Armand. I think him doing that, Molloy being high and drunk and careless, saved his life in the long term and gave him purpose to even be here today interviewing Louis. So, um, no, I think that was the first time that Louis spoke that plainly to Armand. Because I think at the end of the day or two, I think Louis is afraid of Armand. Armand's powerful. Armand is a powerful motherfucker. Like he's not somebody to be fucked with. Now he's not somebody that just throws his power around. But at the same time, I think Louis has tiptoed around him for decades, and I think the drugs and the drinking of Molloy's blood gave him the courage to speak plainly.
Frank, we have a comment here in our live chat. Thank you so much to Naya. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. I apologize if I'm not. But she says, I understand Armand's reasoning, but he's just so pathetic that I just can't. Altering someone's memory just so they can be in a relationship with you is next level. Follows up by saying, I would rather be held hostage than beaten to death than have my entire personality altered to
Mm,
someone else's liking.
mm,
Bars.
mm.
Okay.
Good
Bars.
night. I hear you.
Oh my goodness. Yes. And I actually wanted to read a quote from Assad Zaman, who plays Armand. This is a quote from Entertainment Weekly on this episode. And Assad says that Armand is a very protective person because he's suffered a lot. So he tries to protect whatever reality he has going, whether or not that reality is good or bad or for other people, and continues by saying, I think he's incapable of seeing something that might be toxic, but he just wants to keep the reins in so that he can survive. So after listening to the actor's interpretation of the character and everything that unfolded in this episode, does that maybe change your mind about Armand and how things have seemed to played out for him as someone who has experienced true abuse, has a lot of trauma in his life, and he's trying to contain the things that he wants to keep?
My views of Amon has never changed. Dating back to the last week, um, I said Amon is still that 21-year-old boy, that sailor boy who's on the deck being assaulted, raped, abused. He's still that boy. The only difference is he has powers now. That's the only difference. The thing about torment and abuse is that if you don't come to grips with it and seek help, I don't care how powerful you are, how powerful you seem to be on the exterior, you're still broken. And last week I said Armand is still that broken sailor kid that was on the deck 400 or 500 years ago, um, by his maker and people that kidnapped him as well, the slavers that kidnapped him. He's still that same person. He just has powers now, and I really think just because you're a vampire, I really think how you're made plays a part to who you are as a vampire moving forward. These are immortal beings, but if you're he was made under such abusive, violent terms, and I think he's never dealt with that. Because there are bouts of insecurities with Amon that he hasn't been able to come to grips with. I mean, I'm sure there's no vampire therapists out there or vampire groups he can go to like come to terms with this. But like the show did a great job of showing that. Well, Lestat, how when Lestat ghosted him, he never got over that. Like we're talking about 150 years between him, Lestat leaving him and meeting Louis. Like he never got over that. So to me, that showed me of the broken nature of what Armand clings on to. He's just a steroid version of Lestat. I mean, a steroid beefed up, powerful version of Louis. They're both insecure. They're both seeking refuge in somebody, and they're dependent individuals. Both of them are. So he's conniving. Don't get me wrong. He's conniving. He's a user, but I there's a level of sympathy I have for him because of how he was made and what he went through way back in Delhi, back in the 1400s or whatever. So
No, that's very true. And I liked how you said that, how a vampire is made given the kind of life that they were living in that moment when they were given the dark gift, I think really strikes a chord, because you look at the different personalities that is Armand, Louis, and then Claudia. You know, we haven't seen, of course, Lestat when he was made and the kind of life that he led up until that moment, right? But I think that definitely weighs true. And talking about how Armand hasn't like dealt with his trauma, he just is very powerful. Louis, given although given how high he is in that moment, this is where that second audio piece that's been enhanced, that Daniel's assistant has worked on, comes into play, because again, these two individuals have very little recollection of the events of 1973, and you're listening to the audio play the argument that happens between Armand and Louis leaves. You hear one door slam, footsteps. Further away is another door, but this time metal. And then you hear Armand running after, screaming Louis. And then when you see the events unfold on screen, now I will give the disclaimer, people, what we're going to talk about next has to deal with attempted suicide. So if that's a trigger for y'all, please, skip ahead, and hopefully, we'll get through this quickly. But Louise having a very difficult time dealing with all that's unfolded, the things that he said. He wants to keep Daniel alive, even though Armand is just, furious and what have you. And Louis does the thing that I guess he felt he could just control, and that was to end his life, his immortal life, by stepping out into the morning sun. And what a visual that was to witness, Frank. I mean, I can only imagine just how much emotion went into Jacob's preparation for that scene. And then, of course, to see the results of Louis being brought back into the apartment, and just how burnt his body is and how charred he looks, and just the amount of pain that he was experiencing physically, let alone emotionally, mentally. And Armand seems like very, I'm trying to think of the word that would best describe it, but it's like he cares for Louis, but then he's also super pissed of the acts that Louis just performed. One, biting Daniel, two, wanting to keep him alive, and then three, trying to commit suicide to escape it all. What was that scene like for you?
Man, if I could place one word on that scene, it was damaging, on all parties. It was damaging for Molloy. I mean, a young man with, trying to find his way through life, kind of going through his own little doing his shit. It was damaging for Louis, just like so overwhelmed with the guilt of what he said to Armand, so overwhelmed with like where he's at in this point of life. And another thing I want to point out too, we know Louis as somebody who doesn't like to feed on humans. For Armand to say he's killed 128 people, what in the fuck happened post Paris? That's not Louis. That's Louis that we know. To feed on and murder 128 people, and maybe I'm wrong, Brandon, but I took that when Armand said that Louis did all those killings, not Louis and Armand. Like that's Louis' stronghold, that little apartment right there, the drugs, the whole act of getting these people, these young men. I'm assuming all men are drugged up and like just eradicate them. it was damaging. It was very damaging to see that because something changed over the last 30 years post Paris for Louis to go to those measures to feed and play with his food. Like it was almost like I was watching Lestat in a way. Like it was very, very, and I don't know that was symbolism for the director to put that in there, but the behavior changed since Paris with Louis in that apartment. I didn't recognize Louis, and it was for me. It was also damaging for Armand for to finally get the finality of like what Armand's been doing. I've suspected this for the last 5 weeks now that he has altered memories in Louis and Molloy. To see that as well play out was also damaging. It was just a damaging scene, man. Like and I think this scene is going moving forward it will be irreparable damage. And even like in the show itself, this is 40 years later or 50 years later, you still see the irreparable damage that Molloy and Louis are going through now. So yeah, just damaging on all accounts.
I think damaging is definitely a great word to describe that scene. It was tough. I think you could kind of foresee that decision being made because for many it's a very tough life that people may live, and sometimes they feel that's the final solution to their problems. And my heart goes out to those who have experienced that and felt that. And it's no different for Louis as well. I mean, but then to also continuously be punished even though he's in pain, he's trying to plead to Armand, and Armand's just now torturing him mentally, emotionally. I mean, at this point, it's kind of hard to determine how long Daniel has been in that apartment. He's bled out, and Armand is just kind of like biding his time. I don't know how or what entails healing a vampire, if it means like putting them in their coffin, because we hear Louis begging Armand several times throughout this episode. Armand, it hurts. It's like it's still burning, and please don't kill him. Please leave it alone. That kind of situation. And Armand is really just like toying with Daniel at this point. And I'm trying to find my notes here. Armand kept Daniel alive. He listened to the tapes twice, trying to figure out what it is that Louis found in Daniel, and but what's so special about him? And there really isn't, right? We've got already talked about this. Daniel is just like an ordinary guy. He's got his fucked up life that he's lived or what have you. And the idea too that of course Louis is still semi obsessed with Lestat, right? And Armand does do kind of like I won't say a redemption move, but he offers to reach out to Lestat, right? So that Louis may talk to him. Talk us through that, Frank.
Yeah, man. So you got Louis just charred barbecue, man, in his casket, just in pain, and he's in Armand. That was tough to watch, man. More so for Armand because you see the physical damage that Louis has succumbed to due to his attempted unaliving of himself, and then you see the mental scarring that Armand's having. So you see scarring on two different spectrums in that one scene: the emotional scarring that Armand is going through, and the physical scarring that Louis is going through that he caused himself. And he's like, "Look, man, I've done what I can do. I can't. If I'm not good enough for you, well, let me find your maker. Let me find your first love. And if you want to, I can reunite you too. You seem happy with him. You walking in this light with you for the last 35 years or whatever. It keeps coming up. Let's stop. Look how it was to Claudia. Then let's start again. Let me find this man for you. And again, man, this human T-Mobile AT&T ability this man has to venture the world, to go cerebral and go through all these vampire all these
Cerebro is the right word. Yes.
yeah, like
Cerebro.
he went cerebro and found this
Yeah.
man like that. Like he finds Lestat. And Louis can't hear Lestat's thoughts. Only Armand can. So he's pretty much communicating with Louis and Lestat and back forth. And he's pretty much saying, hey, Lestat, Louis here. He's in pain. He's been thinking of you. What do you want me to say to him? And he tells Lestat that. Lestat's like, uh, is I think he told Lestat that he hurt himself, and this was surprising me the most out of that scene. Lestat was shocked. He was worried because I'm at this point I'm listening to this because this is the first time we're hearing Lestat as far as like not as an extension of Louis or the schizophrenia he's going through, but actually Lestat's voice. And it wasn't anger, it wasn't frustration, it wasn't like this murderous vibe of like, if I get my hands on this motherfucker, I'm gonna kill him. It was, is my baby okay? What's wrong with him? Why is he harmed? Why did he do that to himself? And I think Armand was hoping that, and this is me just speculating. I think Armand was hoping that Lestat would still be angry of how things were left. And Armand looks very surprised when he hears Lestat saying, "I'm worried about him. Tell him I love him. Tell him I love him." And he says it over and over again. And Armand, at this point, Lamont is translating everything to Louis, so Louis can hear everything. But when Lestat says that, Armand refuses to let him know, to let Louis know that he still loves you. And you hear the panic in Lestat's voice, like, "Hey, Armand, tell him, please tell him." Like he's back, like it's my the first time really since the finale of episode 8 that Lestat's begging, like he's at his whim, he's trying to break through to Louis, and Armand just pretty much just excommunicates him and just stops all contact at that point. That shit was rough. It was rough on all three accounts. For one, it's rough for the current boyfriend to see that the ex-boyfriend still wants your boyfriend, and you don't know where your boyfriend stands when it comes to like him wanting them back or not. And it's even more shocking to you that you hear the yearning of your boyfriend's ex wanting to know if he's okay. That had to been painful for Armand. I'm not absolving Armand for what he's done.
Sure.
I'm just putting myself in the shoes of somebody who feels wrong, who was hurt, that somebody who he's loved in his way loved him for as long as he has. He's not really returning that favor. No, did he ever. And knowing that man's back in the picture that you ain't spoke to, and I'm assuming Armand hasn't spoke to Lestat in 100 at this point, probably 200 years since he ghosted him. So Armand's dealing with that trigger of like not hearing from him, while simultaneously dealing with the trigger that this man still loves his current boyfriend. It was a lot, man. It was a fucking lot.
I gotta share this comment real quick from the live chat, Frank from M Moves. Armand is trash now and forever. Listen. All right. I'm gonna catch up on the live chat here, y'all, but just bear with me. So Frank, I definitely agree with you about how Armand must have been hurt just as much as Louis has been hurting. And this is just something that it's obviously a pattern that people do. Misery loves company. And you're going to extend that hurt and that misery to the ex, whom Armand probably has found earlier in the relationship he's had with Louis. He's probably figured out, of course, that Lestat has been alive and well all along. Just didn't want to have to reach out to him until maybe the right moment, right? That's just my speculation. And so that moment being Louis attempted suicide, he's hurt. I'm reaching out to Lestat. Hey, by the way, I'm with your ex. He's hurt. Do you want to talk to him? Like, who does that? Who honestly does that? You want to keep just twisting that knife a little more, inch by inch. And then whatever Armand was expecting to hear from Lestat, if it was an angry tone, if it was, I don't give a shit about that guy anymore, or What I don't think he was anticipating hearing that Lestat still feels a certain type of way towards Louis that Louis might still feel. He just hasn't openly admitted to it, because eventually Louis will say to Armand, like, it doesn't matter, like, it's over, it's done. Like, he was very quiet throughout that whole ordeal when Armand was translating Lestat's words, right? And the fact that Armand couldn't bring himself to say, I love you, quoting Lestat to Louis, I love him. Please tell him I love him. I love you. I love you. And then you hear that withdrawal away, right, from that conversation. For Armand, I'm sure he feels some type of way because, Lestat fell out of love with him at some point, right? Obviously, they parted ways. And it hurts to hear that, your former lover and your current boyfriend's former lover is still in love with your current boyfriend. Wild. That's just too much to me.
Armand lost twice in that one conversation.
Bars, right?
he lost twice. Like he lost the first time because when in reaching out to Lestat, and I'm assuming this is the first time he's reached out to Lestat since Lestat ghosted him, right?
Sure.
Lestat
But,
say, hey,
but he's found him. I'm pretty sure he's found him before.
Yeah, I'm sure he kept tabs on him, knowing where he's at and all that kind of stuff. But like when he reached out to Lestat, it wasn't, Lestat didn't say, oh, how you doing? How you been? I missed you. I'm sorry for what I did. There was no like bouts of like regret and anguish and like apologeticness from Lestat to Armand. That's the first loss. The second L is I still miss the person that I made, your current boyfriend. So he lost twice. And look, and to the viewers watching this, it comes off as if I'm an Armand apologist. But one thing about this show we have to understand is that toxicity in this show is the norm when it comes to vampire love that we've seen so far in this world, whether it's Claudia and Louis, whether it's Louis and Lestat, whether it's Armand and Louis. Toxicity and narcissism is embedded in these relationships. And yes, Armand is trashed. You know who else is trash too? Lestat. And nobody's saying Lestat's trash. He's trash too. We watched Lestat for a full season in season 1 do what he did to Louis, abuse him, probably playing a hand and killing his brother as well, committing suicide. The dropping Louis 100 feet in the air or 300 feet in the air to the ground and damn near killing them. Like the toxicity of these relationships with vampires, man, in this world that's like the norm. It's almost like a coming of age. There's no pure love when it comes to this in this Anne Rice world. All this is embedded in toxicity. You're muted.
My bad. You would think after years of doing this, I'd know better. Let me catch up in the chat, y'all. So we've got what a doll. I'm trying to figure out the handle. What a doll's life says, when did Louis go from killing only bad people to just killing everybody he meets? Does that strike you as too big a change? Is that Armand's influence?
That's what I said, man.
For real.
The 128 bodies, man. That's alarming to me. It's one thing if Lestat's doing it. It's one thing if Sebastian's doing it. I mean, not Sebastian. Santiago's doing
Santiago.
It. Yeah, this is a guy who was feeding on rats in season 1 because he didn't want to touch humans. Now he's just murking people night after night in San Fran. Like, this is crazy.
Also, What a Doll's Life says, if Armand was able to go through all this to save Louis and spare Daniel, and yet doesn't help Claudia, I'm going to be mad.
Get ready to get mad.
Okay, buckle up. And Naya also says, Armand secretly likes to see Louis in pain, but that's the way he can be the, quote, good nurse. Listen.
Hey, nah, man, I don't appreciate you coming on with all these bars today, man. Like one bar per podcast. That's like your third bar today, Naya.
Come back next episode and give us another one.
No, but that's a good point, though. That's a good point. Yeah. I think Armand needs to be needed. Like, he needs to be needed.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and continuing with Naya's comments, I think that Armand has done a lot of shady stuff behind the scenes and makes it for it by being a doormat for Louis. I think he played a bigger part in, spoiler, Claudia's death. Yeah.
Something came to my attention in this episode too. So when I I can't remember was the part where Louis is about to drain Molloy, or when Molloy is about to be drained by Armand. But it had something to do with Molloy being alive. And Armand was like, "Do you want?" No, I'm sorry. Scratch what I said. It was the story of Louis telling Molloy his story about whatever,
Okay.
and Armand is like, "Do you want Paris to catch up with us?" Do you remember him saying
Ah,
that?
yes. It's during the argument between Louis and Armand. Armand has just thrown Louis off of Daniel. He's, slammed up against the wall, unconscious, bleeding out, what have you. And they're going back and forth. And there's a lot of overlap with
Yeah.
the dialogue. So you really have to like pay attention or go back and watch with closed captions, just like I do, because I can't hear worth a damn. Um, but yes, I did distinctly hear that line from Armand about, do you want Paris to catch up with us? So that's an Easter egg, or that's, planting the seed
Big
for
time.
what's to happen, because we do know from photos that Daniel has that the theater did burn down. Louis, when he first heard this, he's like, fire. Like, he has, again, no recollection of this event whatsoever, but we're gonna cross that bridge when we eventually get there.
But,
So
hold
go
on.
ahead.
But when
Yeah.
Armand said that, though, there was fear in his eyes. Like, he was
Mhm,
terrified.
mhm.
Like the strongest vampire we've seen on the screen in 2 seasons, he was terrified. So it makes me wonder, not just Town Masker, but are the other powerful entities, supernatural entities, who are out there trying to bring them to justice for what they did in Paris for whatever reason, however that fight came about. Because
Listen,
Armand was scared when he said that shit.
you're right. But listen, if I get to see the Winchester brothers pop up in this show and try to like fuck shit up here, I need to see Dean again, y'all. I need to see Dean again. Just saying. Okay, sorry. I had to throw in a little joke there. Yes, I totally agree. Yeah, because Louis, it kind of like it sobered him up just a little bit, it seemed. But I don't know. I don't want to jump ahead too much, because I'm very much excited to see where this season ends up. So let's go back to talking about this episode. Of course, there's one line in here that Armand has with Daniel, young Daniel, as they're talking, and then you're seeing the absolute control of Armand take over Daniel. Right? He's taken over his body, and he's talking with him and talking about how he's listened to the tapes over and over, just trying to figure out what the hell's so special about Daniel. Nothing. There's absolutely nothing special about him. But hearing that this line of bartering with desire, is that what makes you so special? That line kind of just like left me, because I like the idea or the concept of bartering with desire is truly what so many of these vampires do. And it was like utterly projecting. I don't know. Maybe I'm off base here, but I think that was just like a banger of a line that came from Armand. Because obviously at some point we do hear Daniel say, like, make me into a vampire. It sounds amazing. Like, you Louis, you wanted to give it all up. Like, what the hell is wrong with you? This sounds amazing. Like, this life that's you led. Yeah.
For for the first time, like from Armand's perspective and hearing his voice, you hear the classism and the elitist nature of Armand. Like, you killed them 130 people, human beings. When the fuck do you see this lowly ass human being? Like, it was almost like, how dare you, the gall of you, to keep this slithering blood sack alive. And like, you never hear Armand talk like that. The tone of which he talked of, like that tone, I would expect Santiago to talk like that, or anybody from the Vampire Theater to talk like that. The frustration in that man's voice. He
Hmm.
said that, what makes this motherfucker so fascinating. That was years of frustration that came out. That was years of confusing, and like, motherfucker, I gave up my covenant for you. I gave up
Hmm.
Paris for you, and you gonna talk to this motherfucking human and almost divulge the way of vampires, the way of the supernatural life to this motherfucker. What does he have on us? What does he have that I don't have?
Hmm.
That's what I got from it. It was the gall, the classism, the elitist nature. He almost spoke out of confidence. Mine
Oh
never
yeah.
speaks confidence. It's always insecure. Is rooted in insecurity. But with humans, it's like, look, I might be a lowly vampire, I might be low confidence, but I know where I rank when it comes to the food chain with human beings, and that motherfucking ain't it. That's what I heard from my mom when he said that shit.
Naya's done it again, Frank. Oh my God. Armand is physically strong, but he is mentally weak. And that's why he couldn't hold the coven twice. Horrible leader.
Man.
Here we go.
Night come with the slugs today, man. I ain't mad at it. I ain't mad at it.
She says I wrote a lot, but I think I can comment on that. Yeah. So, we always appreciate comments from the live chat. We tease, of course. We really do appreciate those in the live chat sharing their thoughts. King B Johnson here. As long as we don't have to watch the hashtag Twilight tapes or any other. Listen, I'm with you on that one. I will rewatch Interview with a Vampire, the 1994 movie. Probably the only movie I like Tom Cruise in, because I am not a TC fan. Just saying. Sidebar.
I got questions for the group. People who are watching, comment here. Who do you find more toxic, Lestat or Armand? And who would you want if you had to choose only out of these two men? Who would you want Louis to be with, Lestat or Armand? I just want to get a gauge of like what people are thinking.
How does one even answer that? Like, that's just.
I ain't said the choices were great, but those are
his only options. Damn. Oh God, I don't know. Daniel. I want him to be with Daniel. That's who I want him to be with. Shit, I don't know. That's like just Prince Nuna said neither. Yes. You know what? For Louis' sake, I'd rather Louis be dead. Truly, like I'd rather he be dead than be with either one of those crazy ass vampires. Like, no. But we digress. But yes, do leave your comments and thoughts about who you would rather Louis see and be with for time and all eternity, Lestat or Armand. Leave it in the live chat. Leave it in a comment. If you're watching the replay, we'd really appreciate it. So going back, we finally get the answer that we've all been waiting for. Frank and I have theorized, of course, about Armand's abilities, right? We know he not only was given the dark gift, but he also appears to have the cloud gift, meaning he can fly. He has some sort of pyro gift where he can summon fire, right? Taught Louis how to do this as well. But then the new gift, I say the new gift, but the gift that we've been kind of waiting for confirmation, it seems, is to edit memories, right? He's been able to forcefully, it seems, I say forcefully, but get Daniel kind of like in a hypnosis sort of state where he's rehearsing these lines of you've been in a drug den for days. I've been in a drug den for days. Just repeating things over and over until it's a very believable state of mind for Daniel, right? Because that's kind of more or less what Daniel has said at some point earlier, either in the season or I'm trying to remember exactly. But we come to the realization that Armand, who's always in control, always needs to be in control, has been altering the minds of his one true love, it seems. And when our modern day Armand returns from his hunt, he's just very like, oh, it was great. I had to chase him down, blah, blah, blah. How was Paris? And it's like, oh, we weren't talking about Paris. We were talking about San Francisco. Oh, and, talking about the events that transpired and talking about why was Daniel kept alive? And then you're hearing that kind of rehearsed line from Armand, which was actually something that Louis had said during the 1973 episode talking to Armand. He's like, I had a hunch that he was going to serve a greater purpose or something along those lines. Don't come at me, guys. I don't remember the quote. But Armand is echoing back that line that Louis once told him, and Louis proceeds to mimic or to say the same line at the same time. And the close-up shots on these three men was incredible for me, because that last lingering shot of Louis and that jaw clench. And it's like, oh, he's fucking pissed because now he realizes that so much has been kept from him, altered from him, or his mind being altered. And now we're embarking on like this bigger hill to overcome. And that's discovering, I think, what is truth and what isn't. Thoughts, Frank?
It's fuck. It's like it's like when you've been in a relationship for so long and you find a slew of text messages, videos, things from your ex, that letters that he hid or letters that he altered or she altered, um and like it just hits you all in one time, like damn, these last 15 years were just a lie. And like that's the look that Louis had in his face. Molloy too, like, and like for Molloy, I feel bad for Louis, but I feel worse for Molloy because he's human and he has Parkinson's, and you know he's gonna die soon. And to be at the end of your life to realize that that one night in San Francisco pretty much set up your fate moving on for the next 50 years. Um the chanting that Armand did or said to him to right before he was about to kill him, I don't know if that chant was just to put him to sleep or that chant was, hey, this is what your life is going to be for the rest of your life. You're going to be searching for this. You're going to like you know, because in present day he talks about how
Are
he
you
felt.
are you talking about the whole rest, the constant of saying rest? Is that what
Yeah,
you're referring to? Okay,
yeah,
so you're talking about Armand to Daniel when he's
correct.
trying to kind of like hypnotize him, kind of thing. And that's very similar to what Santiago would do on the stage with his
Correct.
victim before he bit them. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, yeah. So I know Amon, his main objective was to kill him and just and put him out of his misery. But I could make the argument that he's been on death row ever since that night. So speaking of Molloy, like the two fair marriages, fucking up his daughters, living his life with through his job and the the makings of wanting to be a great journalist. He sacrificed everything to be a great journalist. Family, loves, everything. And like I wonder that rest chant that Armand gave to Molloy, even though Molloy didn't die, if he put him in his deathbed back in 1973, and that if that was like a trance to say, hey, you would be you won't you would fail in everything else in life except for being a great journalist. Here's your this is your calling. And it makes me wonder, like, is that what happened? Did Armand pretty much seal his fate in 1973, moving forward for the rest of his life? Because that's what happened. That's what
Yeah,
transpired.
it's almost as if he manifested it, right? Like he spoke it into existence, which is utterly wild, which would bring me to a whole other theory of are the things that Armand says truth? Like in other words, will they come to pass? Is it does he have that kind of power to speak things into existence, right? Because so far it seems very apparent for Daniel's
The
life.
motherfucker can stop time. I
That's
mean,
true. Yeah.
at this point, at this point, I won't put nothing behind the capabilities of his power. I think Malloy's future at this point was already written from that rest chain. I think he was doomed to be a horrible husband. He was doomed to be a horrible
Mm,
father. He was doomed to be a workaholic and just worry about Daniel Malloy, a great journalist.
mm.
He was doomed from that night moving forward. He was doomed. I really believe that.
And then, also too, at the point he had already been bitten, Daniel. Daniel had already been bitten. And it's kind of like, why not just make him into a vampire? Because it at that moment when Daniel does finally accept that whole rest, because he was fighting it. He says, I don't want to rest. I don't want to rest. He was aware, I guess, of what Armand was trying to do to him, right? Trying to hypnotize him or to ease him or whatever the case may be. And when he finally agrees, rest, right? He falls into that trap. And then Armand proceeds to, bite him, and Louis emerges from the room, still charged, still, all fucked up and what have you. And he says, Armand, he says, no, don't do this. Let this be the testament to our companionship. Prove to me that, we can get through this by saving this man's life, right? By sparing him, right? And when Armand turns to look at Louis and says, are you asking me, maître, which is the French term for master, right? Because we have previously heard this in another episode where Santiago is trying to kind of step into that role of master of the coven. Armand had chosen. He had made his choice, Louis over the coven, basically. And so when he turns to Louis and says, are you asking me, maître? And Louis responds with, no, Arun, referring to Armand's original name. He says, no, Arun, I'm not asking you. And it was like, oh my God, this is a command. Like this is actually Louis kind of flexing, for lack of a better term. But I was kind of impressed by Louis, because it always seemed like Armand was just calling the shots and Louis was just kind of going with it.
Well, I can make the argument too that Louis has been not in full control, but as far as like he's Armand's weak spot. Like Armand left the covenant for him. Armand gave up power and control of the covenant for him, for Louis. And I think Louis was smart enough to understand that. And I think when Louis really wants something, and I'm sorry, Coven. When Louis really wants something, I think he knows how to confiscate that through Armand's heart, because Armand needs him so badly, and he doesn't want to disappoint him. If Armand can give whatever he wants to make him happy, even if it's just for a day or just for a decade, he's going to give it to him, because Armand doesn't want to be alone, and Louis knows that. They both are dependent on each other. They both have control over each other. And when he spares Molloy's life, that was just another constant reminder of like, you're Louis' bitch in a way. I mean, it's
one way of looking at it.
I said it best. Like, and you're physically strong, but you're mentally weak. Armand said it. Armand said it best in episode 3. He's like,
oh yeah,
to have all this power but still be weak. Like he said himself, like he's very self-aware of his limitations mentally. He knows this, and I think the worst thing that Armand could have done was to disclose that to Louis. Louis was going to use that to his advantages when the time comes, and rightfully so. He used it to save a young man's life. To answer your question too, Britt, about why they didn't turn him, Molloy, I think a big reason why was that Molloy was in a drug-induced binge, and I don't know if you turn a vampire or turn a human being in that particular state. We talk about the traumas that human beings go through right before they turn. He could be in this hysteria, cocaine-driven, induced like hysteria for immortality,
for eternity. Yeah,
for eternity.
He'd be cocaine bear.
Exactly.
Vampire.
Like, think about this: the amount of cocaine that Molloy had in his system almost caused Louis to kill himself. He was drinking from Molloy. So imagine how much cocaine was in Molloy's system. So I think it would have been a clusterfuck of like a disaster had they turned Molloy in that current state of where he was in, going through the drugs that he was going through.
Oh my God. Yeah, that's a valid point. One other comment I want to show here, Frank, from Prince Noonan. The scene where Armand and Louis were mocking each other's trauma made me physically uncomfortable. Like at that point, just break up. Yeah, that was a tough scene to watch too, and it's so, because it's so very real and it's so very raw. That's something I think so many people can relate to in those heated moments, despite however you say or feel towards one another about how much you love them. It's just a very raw emotion, and we're all guilty of stooping down to words and demonstrations of just wanting to hurt the other person. And it's such a volatile way of being. And of course, from the outside, it's like red flags here and there. And the toxicity is just real. Like and that goes to show it's real on any front. Human, immortal, bestiality, probably. I don't know. But it's this episode was absolutely wild to watch. But I was so happy that we finally got the understanding of why Daniel was seeing like these visions pop up into his head of Armand like staring at him and telling him things that were so intimate that only Daniel would have known, especially about selling the Playboy magazines to kids in the school, about having sex with someone with a bag over her head and all these other things. And then finally getting that clarification of why Daniel was seeing a man in cellophane on the floor, and that was because Armand had to kill the neighbor who witnessed Louis trying to commit suicide on the roof.
One thing about all three of these characters in this episode, they're all three of them pieces of shit. All three of them are pieces of shit. Like Molloy is a piece of shit. Like he is vile. He is the taint of America. Like to put a bag on a young girl's head and say, this is the only way I'm gonna fuck you if you put a bag over your head. You don't deserve to look me in my eyes. Like you're the depths of level of shitness you have to be to do that. And to like for Armand to even for Armand to find that memory and unveil that to him, like in the guilt that Molloy has. I didn't feel bad for Molloy. I'm like, bro, you're a piece of shit, bro. Like this is wild.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like I was hoping, just for my own sanity, I didn't want to hear like what he did to his wives or what he did to his daughters. I'm glad they glossed over that, because like that bag over the head shit of that young girl in middle school or high school, wherever grade he was in.
That was a lot.
That's horrid, man. And you heard that multiple times throughout the season so far. And to like really get like a synopsis of like what Molloy was. And this is a young Molloy. He's like in his early 20s. He's done a lot of bullshit in his in his 20-some years of living. Like it's amazing what that man is or was.
And it remains to be seen of all the bullshit that Armand has done for the last 500 years, especially to the people that he quote unquote loves. Wild episode. It was amazing. I think on IMDb it's ranked at a 9.3 out of 10. And listen, y'all, I think these episodes for this season alone have just been straight fire. Like season 1, amazing. Season 2, they really stepped it up, and I think it's phenomenal. I absolutely want to hear what the book readers out there have to say about the AMC adaptation of Anne Rice's Interview with a Vampire. Please leave a comment in the chat if you're watching live, or leave a comment in the comment section down below if you're watching the replay. Frank, is there anything else that you wanted to touch on this episode before we sign off?
One thing I want to touch on at the end of the episode, where Armand comes back from his hunt and Louis pretty much just confronts him from what he's done to Louis and Molloy. Molloy looks scared. Molloy looked like motherfucker. Was confronting him. Was gonna confront him for this. Like I wasn't ready for all of this. Like he looked like, what's next? I wasn't ready for this. Like Louis just kind of like stepped out on his own on that. And it's going to be interesting to see how Armand approaches this next week's episode.
Well, Naya left a comment here saying even young Daniel was mentally strong because he was fighting off Armand. Let's hope that he can tap into a younger version of himself to stay strong and be able to fight off whatever Armand tries to throw at him, and Louis for that sake, because shit's about to pop off.
Yeah,
okay. Shit's about to pop off. It's going to be wild. Pamela here in the chat says all the characters Anne Rice wrote in her world are morally gray, not black or white. Listen, I can talk. I swear to God, I can. I love me a morally gray character, but this stuff is kind of tough. Okay, like personally, I can't speak for Frank, but this is kind of tough.
It's all
Um,
derived from hurt and pain. All these characters are derived from hurt and pain of some
exactly.
sort, and that hurt and pain carries them throughout these
Mhm.
story arcs for sure.
Yes, for sure. Um, what a Doll's Life says vampires are compared to wolves because they cannot accept an equal exchange of power. It must always be hierarchy. Unlike a lot of humans who can adapt and more on because of other interests. Good to know. Appreciate that. Uh, Prince Noonan here says gagging for episode 6. Oh, what a way to end it here, Frank, on our review of the latest episode of Interview with a Vampire. And I failed to mention the episode was entitled Don't Be Afraid, Just Start the Tape. And I will be afraid if someone ever uttered those words to me. First of all, who also uses tape these days? But anyway, Frank, thank you so much for joining me today to discuss this episode of Interview with a Vampire. We only have about 3 episodes left before the season finale. I cannot wait because there's so many questions left in regards to Daniel, Louis, Armand in present time, but then also the events of what took place in Paris. Will Santiago be successful in overthrowing Armand's position as maitre and take over the coven? What will happen with Claudia and then the new friend that she made, the dressmaker, right? And then of course Louis. Where does he stand in all of this? Is he going to be complacent? Is he going to have a hand? Is he going to try to fight whatever's going to happen? That remains to be seen. But I'm looking forward to it, and of course, talking about it with you, Frank, here on our live stream.
I ain't missing a motherfucking Monday moving forward, cuz let's get it. And y'all
Well,
tune, man. I go back and forth between 6:30 and 7, but we'll do our best to like schedule the episodes out. But
yeah,
every Monday from here on over the next couple of weeks, we'll cover every episode remaining.
that's for sure. And also, don't forget to subscribe here to our YouTube channel if you are new and if you've enjoyed our breakdown of Interview with a Vampire. We've got plenty more coming your way, as well as other reviews. We're going to be talking about Deadpool tomorrow, gearing up for Deadpool and Wolverine. We're very excited about that. And also, House of the Dragon makes its big return this weekend, and The Boys. We're a huge fan of The Boys, so y'all be sure to hit that subscribe button, like this video, hit that notification bell, that way you know the next time we go live, which will be tomorrow actually. So for Frank, for myself, I'm Brittany, and also lastly, before I forget, don't forget to follow us on our social media platforms. That's Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Threads. Don't forget to use the hashtag Watchers Basement to help grow our audience. And we also got you covered with audio podcasts. I swear, God, I can talk. Audio podcasts available on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Be sure to give us a follow and give us a 5-star rating. So that wraps up our review for Interview with a Vampire. And to not quote, or maybe not echo Daniel, but then what? We'll see y'all next time.